Hey, Bradley and I finished playing 13 Sentinels together.
Man.
Congrats, y'all.
Thank you, thank you. I saved another soul, another crown, and
How
another
did you
gem in
like
my.
the fact that if you've watched every 1980s sci-fi film, you could kind of piece together the plot of this movie, this game?
You have to watch a lot of sci-fi films.
Man.
Yeah. You got a little bit of Terminator, you got a little bit of Star Wars, you got a little bit of Mechagodzilla,
Got some Matrix in there.
yeah, some Matrix.
We will get into spoilers, but Bradley, what is your spoiler-free review of 13 Sentinels?
Man, it's just it's a really fantastic sci-fi story. Like they took as many tropes of both sci-fi and also like shoujo manga and smashed them together, which if you were to pitch that to me, I'd be like, oh, that sounds so clumsy and clunky, but it was so beautiful. I don't know how they did it. I really don't.
Yeah, and like, beautiful's a good word because also the aesthetics and music and how certain scenes crescendo and how the background elements are placed. I would just constantly be like, Bradley, look at those background characters and like, look how much personality the background characters have, even though they're just there. They'll never talk. Like, or some that talk a little bit, like the track girls are so like, they all have their own personalities just based on their couple lines of dialogue.
I'm saying.
They go through a lot of lengths into fleshing out this world, and it actually serves to put you in the headspace of the characters when you find out a little more about like what their fight really means and who they're fighting for. Rather, the fact that they're not really fighting for anyone in certain ways. Like it gets real fucky when you start thinking about it. But yeah, Bradley, that's the review. It's a good game, pretty.
Yeah, and also one thing I just want to shout out these devs for is a lot of times I get really frustrated with feeling like devs are out of touch with what it would actually be like to be a player playing their game. But this game really astounded me because I feel like there is always a button you can press to do whatever it is you want to do. It's like no matter what like a mode I'm in, I'm like 2 button presses away from the event archive, so I can, easily cross-check this thought I was having, no matter what I'm currently doing, whether I'm fighting or in a cutscene.
UX is very carefully considered.
Yeah,
It's incredible.
especially in the battle mode because that shit gets hectic.
I will say the UX is the weakest in the battle mode just because they put the map in the middle of the screen where it's like, hey, could you move this to a corner, please? Aside from that, like, we can get into the battle mode because I feel like this is when people talk about 13 Sentinels, it's almost universal praise for the story. And then the people who got the combat and played it on intense, and the people that didn't get the combat and played it on easy just get it over with, and they'll complain about the combat.
I love the combat in this game. Actually, when y'all started playing it, I went back and just started doing the challenge, not the challenges, but the extra missions on the intense mode.
Yeah, Bradley would leave and I would do 3 missions just for funsies.
It's so fun.
Yeah. It's
like the thing with the combat is like playing even on normal, but like playing on the harder difficulties, it pushes you to maneuver your dudes. Like Bradley and I did do some like I did push him to kind of try everything, but even after I pushed him, he just naturally used everything in his arsenal. Like I think the weaponry and the generations are so well considered to where it's like and diversified enough to where like you will use every armament for different situations and you're going to find your favorites, but oftentimes either because if you're running out of EP or the way the enemies are lined up or the positioning of your characters, you're going to use those niche tools that you only use a couple times but they have their uses.
It's even better when like you're doing those missions and like everyone you don't want when you can like after so many missions your pilots get like brain damage and so can't be used for a turn. And you can reset all of them, but you want to keep the score going up, because number go up that good.
Only cowards use the refresh feature.
Yeah, and at one point, I think I only had like 6 actual functioning mechs at one point, and none of my synergies lined up when I was building with these 6. I just fucked up my pattern way back when. I must have been drunk or something, or I wasn't thinking.
It's easy to happen.
Yeah, and I had to find a mission with that because I refused to give up, and I did it, and I cried. Not really, but it was just painful.
Dude, Bradley would have some missions where like he would just be on the edge of his seat, like, Talk about some of your war stories.
I think the combat was pretty perfectly balanced for me on Intense, because I think maybe a third of the missions on Intense I barely scraped by. The rest of them I did well, but I was having to really think and use everything on all of those missions.
And not in a frustrating way. He only lost twice, and it's really well paced as long as you just are leveling up your stuff and you're keeping all your units well rounded. It's really well considered.
I was having a blast, and it's relaxing.
Oh yeah,
all of the attacks feel good to do. Like when the kaiju pop and explode, I'm just like, ooh.
There's some of my favorite combat things: hitting someone with Nenji's Demolisher Blade and just watching, or hitting someone with Juro's Plasma Cutter and just watching the numbers fucking shoot up. Shooting your first missile rain is a historic video game moment.
It's like, what does this do?
This crash.
You become a Final Fantasy boss with that fucking attack.
Crashes the Nintendo Switch is what it does.
That's the thing. I'm watching that one 13 Sentinels Let's Play on YouTube, and at first, at the 8-hour point, they didn't have missile rain on any of their Gen 3s.
Yeah, there's a point in the game where they're like, man, the Gen 3s are just not good, and then chat's like, hold on.
They're like, we don't get why you do Gen 3s. We see the niche on all the other ones, but Gen 3s are just trash. And then they get missile rain, and then they're like, oh.
And then you realize super large missile is insane, and you're like, okay. Yeah. And then Gen 4 is just sneaking behind people and doing their leg mines or their leg spikes and dropping interceptors. And
Gen 3 is the artillery ones, right? Where they have all the big guns. Yeah. Those are my favorite to use.
Double railgun with Tomy. Every character's got their niche.
You're going to sit here, and we're going to funnel them in here, and you're going to just shoot them.
It goes without saying, but Ryoko Shidanome's double sentry guns is a fan favorite because it's just so easy to use. You just drop those sentry guns and go on with your life. You got Goto and Megumi with their many interceptors. Bradley ended up using flare, which I think people really underutilize. He was using the flares all the time.
Oh, I use flares all of the time. Holy shit, that thing is useful and needed on those later missions, because holy shit, there's a bunch of garbage flying at you.
And Bradley was all about shielding characters, so it's cool watching how people play differently. And again, if you enjoy the combat, the post game has mechanics that don't even show up in the game at first.
Fuck mission 5.
Fuck mission 50. You don't know.
Yeah. Well, mission 5 is the one where they introduce the not random, but the teleportation.
Yeah. There's an enemy that will teleport all your units at the start of the battle, and you're like, oh cool, Nenji's at the corner of the map.
Yeah.
And Hijiyama's in the other corner, and done.
Then when you get into range of him for melee attacks, or you hit him, he does it again. Because just fuck you, I guess.
Fuck you.
What Willer was saying one time is there's 10,000 bonus missions. They're not gonna explain all these mechanics to you. You have to see them happening on the fly and adapt, and that's cool because that's what the characters are doing, man.
There's, I don't know if you've noticed, Joe, they might not have even popped it up yet. You might notice sometimes that your high arcing missile attacks aren't landing, super large missile wasn't landing, and then I realized the enemies start putting flares of their own, purple flares that are high up in the air that stop high arcing missiles, so you have to either shoot around them or shoot at just a different wave.
Damn.
And stuff
I don't know if I've run into those yet.
And then you start running into buffed up versions of the gladiators that just fuck up your close range dudes. It's great. But enough about the combat. I think the meat of the game is the narrative. And I think the narrative is super well executed and super addicting to go through. And that's the biggest strength of the game. Yep. Cool.
I'm just thinking back to my time, because I think part of the reason why I enjoyed the narrative so much was that I was able to bounce off my theories because I played this a year ago.
Yeah.
And this was just after you finished it, after our game of the year, and I would just throw fucking things your way, or I just talk to you about them or ask questions. So I think that really elevated it for me.
Yeah, Joe would send me his list of predictions. That was always fun.
I think the last one I sent was 75% to what was actually going on. And I still had a bunch of stuff left.
That's the thing.
When I sent it.
It's but go on.
But I think if I was playing this by myself, the narrative I think would still be fun, but I would just be so addicted to that mission mode that whenever I got cut off, I would kind of be annoyed. But
Joe's not much of a story gamer, to be fair.
yeah, that being said, I still really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I liked that there's, I think a big part of like visual novel games is that you need to incorporate that games part to it somehow.
Yeah.
And I think they do that really well. There's still a lot of interactivity. There's still a lot of like choice and decision making you're doing, and you're still controlling stuff. Like, I don't want your visual novel portion to just be like you're hitting X to go to the next line of dialogue. I want there to be some sort of puzzle, whatever element to it.
I think even there's a couple layers to it. Even the selecting the order is fun. It's addicting. Yeah. Like Bradley would be like, "Ooh, I thought about it. I want to do this character when I get back to your house tomorrow," and stuff like that.
That's also really good. But I don't know how y'all did it. I literally just went down a line until I got stopped, and then I was like, "All right, who's next?" And then just move around the wheel.
Man, it's crazy because like Willer had mentioned some things I'm noticing now from checking out other people's Let's Plays where like in some people's Let's Plays, they will be halfway through Yuki's story at a time that is before I ever even had her unlocked.
Yeah, it took him so long to get Yuki and Nenji. I was like, are we doing something wrong?
Which is the thing is like a lot of these people unlocked her story like in their second or third video or something.
Yeah.
How do you unlock her? Is it like you just go down another person's path?
Do a couple of shoes.
Every character, I think, has a couple of unlock condition chapters.
Yeah.
No, I've never looked into it for sure, but like a really fun part is the different order you go through things. Like, for example, Bradley was so blindsided by Kyutoshiba plot twist, for example.
Oh my god!
It took him a while to get there. I did Juro relatively early in the grand scheme of things. And I also noticed there's like a scene that you do from Shu's point of view, and Kyuta's not there. I was like, this is really sus.
I'll say I got Kyutoshiba at like 75% or something.
I mean, Bradley also, it had been so long that he forgot the first scene with Shiba as him erasing Juro's memory. So he's like, how could Shiba be? He's like, how could Shiba be bad?
He would never do this to me.
That was me going, this is fucking sus. And then he doesn't show up on the wheel. I'm like, who the fuck are you that you're not showing up on the wheel of characters that select from?
But then there's Miwako and Okino, so you're throwing off the scent a little bit.
A little bit, but like it just was.
Bradley was half convinced that Miwako was going to be the main antagonist.
Man, I was like, because that's how bad Shiba hurt me.
Yeah, like, Shiba broke this man. It was hilarious. It was so
I never suspected Miwako before Shiba, like, because I just trusted him.
Yeah, but like the order you go through things is fun. Like, I think Bradley had a really fun time figuring out the Erika Aiba 426 situation.
Oh, girl.
Oh, yeah. I think another thing that I really like is that each story you go through isn't like the retelling of the same day from a different perspective.
No, they very rarely overlap the story. It happens like 5 times where they overlap.
And when it does, it's significant because it's there to connect dots.
Yeah.
But like Ogata's storyline, for example, is like completely separate from everyone else until
it's an afternoon. Yeah, like in a simulation.
And then so like I think that really helps the variety of it is that like you're not going through like, all right, now this happens, I have to watch this scene again. It's not like VLR where like you go down a path and then you hit the combine point and then it's like 15 minutes of the same dialogue or whatever.
You hit that skip button to get to the next new dialogue.
Yeah, but like even then it's still just kind of like, all right, let's move along.
Yeah. It's a very well-paced story, which is like, the story's first draft was allegedly double the size, and then it's like, would that have been a greater game? And I'm like,
no,
not necessarily, because it took us like 50 hours to beat it. It took me 45-ish, 40 in my personal time when I first played it. And like, the thing is, the game never dragged because of how it was paced. So I don't think adding more necessarily would have added. Like, it would have been cool to get more of Tamao, and there's apparently like AI Hijiyama was going to get a plot line that's as relevant as AI BJ, aka Miura. So
I do think the one weakness of this is the AI robots with the personalities in them. That was the one where I was just like, this is getting a little bit too just like off the rails for me.
Was it?
Yeah. I think so.
I never had any problems with the AI, like, because once you introduce the concept of nanomachines that integrate with your brain that much, and like that's why the journey of 426 I think is so badass, because that dude has transcended humanity and is just an AI personality. They really go into it with. They also go into the ethics of it with a scene between Okino and Ace Sekigahara where they talk about kind of like what it means to be a AI consciousness and all that has to do with. Bradley and Joe, what were some of your favorite like plot drops or favorite like plot moments that you can remember, or maybe favorite connections that you made?
Well, the first time oh yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, Tomoe, her being like a future time traveler or have already gone through a cycle, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Many characters went through multiple cycles. The main ones are Morimura and Jiro Izumi. 426 are the main, and Ida are the main loop travelers.
It's Ogata's girlfriend. She's like the only playable character that remembers what happened, is kind of a little bit of aware what happened before.
No,
that was
you're hazy on the details. Tomi from the last loop is the idol who's helping them the most, if that's what you're thinking of.
No, they're like Tomi that like you end up playing is from a different loop and gets transported to the modern times. Yes, I'm pretty sure.
No, not from a different loop. She's from a different sector. But so
because that sector got invaded first.
Yeah, most of the characters are from other sectors. To be fair.
Yeah, it's just. But I think for me, like I put her playing her off for so long that it came to me a surprise that she actually like came from that and wasn't just like another character in this time.
Yeah, like she her interlude is her being like, "Wow, the '80s are so quirky because I've heard so much about them."
Yeah. Let's see, I'm trying to think what else was there. The robots one was just like, "What the fuck is going on here?" For sure. With AI Tomoe as who I think was with Goto. Maybe I'm misremembering it. Whoever made the
Goto used to give her drugs back when she was in the 40s, but that's the Tamao of this loop. There's a lot.
But Tamao also got put into a machine at one point.
Tamao from last loop is an AI. Yeah. A lot of them died in a explosion, so they're AI remnants of them.
Mm-hmm. I was also like the concept of the multiple Morimuras was another one that was really good.
There's like 5 of those bitches.
I know.
Oh my god! Because like here's the thing, I spent like 20 plus hours trying to reconcile how all of these different Morimuras I saw could be the same person. In reality, not only were they pretty much all different Morimuras, there were actually even more Morimuras that I didn't know about.
So Bradley, what were some of your favorite reveals or twists?
Man, the first time I heard the phrase millions of years, that was a huge one. Time travel isn't real.
Time travel isn't real is when I was like, oh wait, this game is fucked up.
That was piecing that together at one point because I was like, I realized like, so they can only go back in time so many years, but then whenever they go back in time to that time spot,
there's no continuity
happening.
Yeah,
and so to me it's like they're either traveling parallel worlds or they're happening simultaneously or something.
I was in the train of either parallel worlds or something I can't think of, but it was never that they're not time traveling at all.
I think there's a point where they're discussing the satellite construction and then it clicked to me of like, oh, they're different pods or they're it's a huge space station. They're each just different.
They dropped the words residential zone early on, and that's like a big hint, but it's so easy to miss. That's
what triggered it for me because I was just like, oh, it's a big space station and they're separated for some reason.
For me, I did that, and then like 1 or 2 after I did the one where Shu hits the corner of the world. Yeah. And that's when I'm like, not only is none of this real, but 2188 was the past, wasn't it? And like I was able to get a lot of the story from those two events next to each other. And it's funny because I'm like, Bradley, there's two events I'm gonna lock you out of doing early.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, Bradley, when you're ready to start understanding the game, you can do one of these two events. And like, he took that to heart. He's like, I want to keep going down the path of chaos. And then when he's like, okay, I want to get it a little bit, and then he went in, and that was fun. But what were some of your other faves?
Oh man, I think the Yuki and Natsuno thing was a big one.
Jesus. Whatever, mom, and they're like, Yuki-chan's my mom in the future? That's so good.
Oh, I've completely forgot about that.
That is such a fucky moment.
Yeah. Yuki-chan.
I have some, like, of course, all those basic ones. Hitting the edge of the world's fucked up.
Oh my god.
One I really like is Murimura clearing up the fact that she is not a real human being anymore, and how that affects the plot, especially on the second playthrough. It's like, wow, this is really interesting. Piecing together the journey of when you piece together the full journey of the original Murimura, the Murimura from 2 loops ago and the Juro from 2 loops ago, and you see how they got to the point where they are now, where one's a cat and a teenage boy inside the mind of another boy, and the other's a big titty nurse who regrets everything she's ever done. It's like so fascinating. Sekigahara dropping the bomb that there won't be another loop after this one to Tetsuya Ida's smug ass was super good. And then of course it's like, but it's such a weird one because they make sure you're gonna get this one in your last 2 hours of playing the game, which is the fact that they're in a virtual world. And this is a point of contention, I think, for a lot of people because The Matrix is like such a prevalent thing in our society. Like everyone's watched The Matrix or thinks of Matrix like plots. So I feel like the way they drop it in that scene is so surreal and beautiful, where like they're kind of talking in their weird pods, and Hijiyama doesn't understand what's actually happening, and Okino drops it. It's like, this was the thing I was missing. Like, we have been in we have never left these pods, and this battle for survival is actually also a battle for us to start living for the first time at the same way. And like, you get the sense that it's all virtual, but the way they phrase it in that still catches you off guard, and it like makes you feel the weight of the journey in a way that even if you knew that it was a Matrix, you wouldn't understand the weight of it until it's explained the way they do it.
It's a weird like metaphor for like that growing up and like moving on into adulthood as like a teenager too. So I think that works really well. Of like, yeah, I'm gonna have to go through trials and tribulations, but I'm ready to do that kind of thing.
Which is
very much like leaving the nest scenario.
It's doubly effective because of the best storyline in the game, Goto, that culminates in Goto bullying a child with the mind of actual Professor Morimura, and then at the end going like, look, I don't have any more blackmail. All I can say is let us try. Let us prove that we can steer humanity for ourselves without your interference, and that we can live on without you. And then it's extra good when like one of his last chapters, he's like, okay, I have nothing else. All I can do is actually beg you for a favor. Please help us get out of this situation. And then she does it. She helps him out because he's such a Chad.
Also, another big drop was that Goto was the jackass that kind of made them like have to develop this system, and this is like his clone or whatever.
Oh, I mean, the whole cloning, like 2188 is fascinating to me. Like the things that transpired in that timeline are so good. And like anytime 2188 would pop up, me and Bradley would get so hyped because it's like, oh, more big lore drops are coming. I think a shocker one Bradley reacted to really fun was finding out Murimura and it was the person who fucked over the world with the nanomachine technology.
Man, and honestly, there's so many people in this game where I say so many. There's like 3 or 4 that I can point to and be like, "This is all your fault." But I don't know. Once you get to 3 or 4 or more people like that, I'm like, it was all them, and it kind of reinforces this idea that like, you people who are inheriting humanity, who just came out of this simulation, you need to be better than us,
Yeah.
and you are better than us by virtue of the fact that you actually woke up from this nightmare. Like,
yeah, like even after finishing the game, it didn't dawn on me nor Bradley that this is happening across the entire universe. This exact same plot line, and like the game doesn't make it explicitly clear until you read an interview. Every time you lose the loop, your body gets killed off, or like your body dies, you go brain dead, and then the nanomachines break you down, and another baby is made in the pod that you died in. So Ryoko Rishino Nome programs these robots to appear to genocide humanity for all eternity, and it's through it's like if you don't realize this is even happening, you can't stop it until it's too late, which is the plot of the game we're playing. They only have 2 loops left to figure it out, or 3 loops left to figure it out before the whole thing gets shut down.
What's incredible is the ratio of like how cosmic the scale of the story is, but like how grounded the motivations for the people who caused it were. Like this one guy just missed his girlfriend. This girl was pissed off she got manipulated. Like this other guy just was rich and he didn't want to die, and he's like, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to stop that from happening.
Like Bradley pointed out that like also everyone's reasons to showing up for the final fight are very different, but they show up nonetheless.
Yeah, and man, it's just like their reasons for showing up to the final battle are also all really grounded, because for a lot of them it's just as simple as like, I don't know, man, I'm in love with this boy, so I'm gonna fight off like millions of kaiju, like, because I love this boy.
Iori went up my rankings when you realized that she's the first person to go fight. Iori doesn't know there's gonna be other Sentinels helping her. She just fucking does it because she's like, I have this robot and I'm gonna fight. Because
instantly shoots her up tears.
I know. I think this game, I benefited a lot from playing it with Bradley again, because I am of the opinion that there's no human, aside from the dev team themselves, that knows the entire story of this game. By that I mean, like, the game does a phenomenal job at telling you the grand strokes of the story. Everyone understands the basic story and what the fight is by the end. They did a great job at that. The devil's in the details, though, where it's like, why did this character act like this in this scene? Like, even a small thing like, there's a scene where there's this thing where Miura starts his chapters and he looks off into the sunset and he's like, the sunset's the same no matter where I am. And it's like, okay, cute, but what's the significance of that? You find out that on the day that him and Chihiro, his little sister, moved in with the Karabes, the sunset looked just like that. That's why the sunset is such an imprint in his mind. But then it's so easy to miss that child Chihiro, who has Morimura's brain in her, still has that innate virtue of being Chihiro, where she also looks at the sun and says the same thing. Man. It's like this extremely minor detail, and the game is littered with those, which is why, like, I am still holding on to this idea that I'm going to make this cohesive video that's going to connect, that's going to go through the story chronologically and explain the little details. Stuff like, oh, notice that Natsuno has a Band-Aid in this scene, which means it's after she got shot in the cheek. Or notice that this scene takes place before Sekigahara loses his memory and stuff like that. So,
man.
We'll close it out, Bradley. Who were your fave characters / fave storylines?
Ooh, so man, here's the problem, right? I just know for a fact the character, every single time I got the most excited to see them from the start to the end, was Goto.
Man, his prologue really teases you so hard.
And man, like, I feel like until I re-unlocked him, I never really knew if he was a good guy or a bad guy.
They do a really good job at making him ambiguous.
But he really is just the coolest. He's like Light Yagami on steroids. He's like an L on steroids, even better.
But he's so human, and he's got a good heart, and like...
He just wants to know, man.
He just wants to know.
He just wants to know.
Any other faves?
Yeah, so as for like my favorite, because a lot of the different character stories have like a different narrative structure, whereas like Juro, you start from the same room every day, but you can branch out to very different locations. Ninja, you're always going to be in the same location no matter what. Some characters you might like be in this timeline in one branch, and in this timeline in another branch, and then this. So you know, I just like I think my favorite like structure was Ninja's, because I think having that very static situation like really highlights the character growth he's going through on each loop.
It's so easy to miss that you see the start, like you
Yeah.
see a scene with Tomy that is in the train station, that is the start of the conversation he has every time you go into his story. And what that tells you is that he fucked up so bad in the real world in that scenario that it's haunting his mind pretty much. And that's why he keeps going back there in this weird dream state, which I think is really fascinating. Also, it happened to come up after we knew time travel was fake. And then we finally got to Denji's story, which is a looping story. It's like, wait, what is actually happening here?
Man. And you know what? I gotta also mention this because it just reminded me. Another reason I think the twist about like that like almost final big twist about the whole thing being virtual all along hits really hard is because like the game's been throwing it in our face the entire time. Like
They really have.
there was an entire character's storyline about looping in a virtual world that's so realistic nobody knows the difference between it and being real.
I've seen the one complaint I've ever seen about the narrative really was like I went to a GameFAQs post for some reason. I forgot what I was doing there. I think I was trying to figure out if anyone. I was trying to get like a list of all the mechanics that happened in post game because I was like, what the fuck just happened to me? And someone was like, 13 Sentinels is a super well told story, but a not interesting story. And then I had to think about it. It's like,
What?
I don't agree because, okay, he's like, I could kind of guess everything that was happening. It was like, okay, first of all, I doubt you could. You could guess the grand. No, there's no way you can spoil. You could spoil the concept of the game. You cannot spoil what actually happens in the story very succinctly. There's so much that happens. Like
You would get so lost and confused.
you could
like,
not spoil what's happening with the Morimuras, what's happening with 426. You cannot spoil what like Tomi Kisaragi's finding out.
I think you forget more about the game than you actually end up remembering when you walk out of it. Like, there's just so much that happens.
It's fresh in my mind, but yeah, maybe like I forgot a lot when I was playing with Bradley. There was a lot of stuff like, oh my god, this happens here. Like I forgot this happens.
Yeah, like y'all just finished it, but
and like my takeaway was like the reason why you might feel like the story is not interesting is because it's taking so much and making something new of it. It's taking every trope you've ever seen and creating a new story. But also, when a twist happens, it almost never feels cheap. There were so many times where a twist happened and Bradley would be like, oh, I kind of felt like this could be the case, but I didn't have evidence. Or like, wow, I didn't see this coming, but now that they say it, it all makes so much sense. And it happens all the time.
You know, there's like the little nagging bit in your brain, like, but what if it is this? And then it happens and you're like, oh my god. And then like I think that's also really good. And like you said, like it's taking those stereotypes and understanding why they're good or why they're loved, but then transitioning to a form that makes it interesting and well engaging, I think also is what elevates it. Because if you tried to be 100% original with this and try to tell a story like this in this way, I don't think anyone could follow it. Like if you try to do like Scarlet Nexus story, which is about like
all this new fantasy stuff,
it's and you try to do it this way, you get lost. You need some sort of grounded reality or storyline that you are familiar with to keep your threads intact.
By using tropes, they could tell a more complex story because they're using such simple ingredients. That's such a good way to like look at it because like I know what an android is, I know what body snatching is, I know what a giant robot is and what threat that poses and all that. Joe, you very quick if you had any favorite characters. I think we talked about it when we talked about it. I remember you really liking Nenji.
Oh yeah, I really liked Nenji a lot. I just thought he was cool. He was just fun because he was just basically Yosuke. I'm trying to think who else. Natsuno was. I don't know how I feel about Natsuno. I feel like I wish she was more in it or she had more involvement. But at the same, she's just a nice little girl to have around.
But like when you realize this, like again, maybe one day you'll replay this or watch a playthrough, but like the things you could connect, that BJ getting those logs that Natsuno's helping him with are so important for the future of humanity and the plot. So like,
I think
everyone plays a very
Hijiyama and the who BJ actually is, I forget what
Mira.
his name is. Huh?
Mira.
Yeah, Mira are two really good characters. Hijiyama, like, I really, really like, and like his is a cool arc because he
Such
has
a
to come
himbo.
to terms with, like, what he like, that he's like, maybe I'm actually gay,
Yeah.
or like just like going through all of that and like having to transition from like this 1940s world to this modern world is just a very fun
The
story.
different way that him and Mira do it are so interesting. My favorites are Goto, Mira, Ogata, and Natsuno. I think are all my faves. Shoutouts to Miwako. I came out of this playthrough really appreciating 426. I think he's such an interesting character now that I think about it, and like who he was originally and who he became to save the world. And also the twist with the meta chips is so clever to me. I think it's done so well, and like it's not just there to be fancy and like tie gameplay into story. It's also the only reason why this loop's gonna be different. Like, or like the only reason why the combat in this loop is gonna function significantly different is because now they have Gen 4 Sentinels and now they have the meta systems, and like that's really cool.
I also them tying, it's kind of ridiculous, but them tying in like, okay, well, we can do this thing because the code of our whole program is actually based off this old video game I used to play.
But then, like, having worked in a game company, it's like, okay, there's 12 people in a spaceship and you gotta save humanity. Are you not gonna take the shortcut that's provided to you? I think that's so good. And like, it wasn't supposed to be bad. The problem is, and like this is really easy to miss because it happens so early in most people's playthrough, Ryoko Shinonome saw that there is no future for humanity and that they're all self-egotistical fuckers because everyone in that spaceship, except for Mira and Natsuno, who are sweet baby boys and girls, was fucked up. So she's like, okay, I'm just gonna fuck humanity, and I'm gonna make the daimos actually show up and kill humanity, and they're gonna be based off of the terraforming machinery. So she and Morimura kind of doom humanity together, and then you could blame Sekigahara for blowing up the space station. You could blame fucking Renya Goto for being a shady motherfucker. There's so many people you can blame there at the end. All that to say, recently I came to the realization that I think this is a top 3 game for me. I think it edges out Kingdom Hearts 2 out of that list.
That's crazy.
Because man, replaying that game was really fun.
I think
there is no game like it. That's the thing. There's nothing even close to it, in my opinion.
I think what also clinches it for me, not my top 5, but what makes me go like, this is a really special game, and I think it's really worth like just like if you, and you should check it out, is the fact that it has an actual gameplay element to it that's fun, which sounds ridiculous.
The game has game?
Yeah, but like it's like honestly what kept me really, compared to like VLR, which I kind of like fell off of and was just getting really tiresome to go through, what kept me on this game was that like the game side of it was actually substance and was there. Like it was giving me a challenge. It was letting me like actually play a game, and it wasn't kind of like a blocker to the next zone. And it still was, but it wasn't in such an impedance that like I hated doing it.
And also another thing, like, just final, like the theme of this game I think is so beautiful. It's like inheriting humanity is what one of the songs called. I also think this is the core theme of the game, because like Tamao Karabe from 2188 made sure to also bring over human culture, which is why they live in different textures. It's like, you're going to understand what being human was, and then we're going to reveal to you what you need to do to continue humanity, and you're going to do that all over the galaxy. It's ultimately a beautiful thing, but then also the trials and tribulations they go through because of the interferences makes it an even more beautiful story, because it also shows how humanity can destroy itself but also overcome itself. I think that's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Bradley, final rating on the game, and how does it stack up against our Willard Bradley games?
Man, because just earlier today, one of our friends asked us to rate Elden Ring, and I think the score I gave Elden Ring was like at the absolute worst, it's a 9 out of 10 for me. The only reason it might not be a 10 out of 10 is because I'm like, it has great sound design, but not like a banger of a soundtrack.
Yeah.
I'm like 13 Sentinels. I like everything about it, and it also has a banger of a soundtrack. I've been listening to the soundtrack during work and other stuff.
And it's cool how the soundtrack, I think very few soundtracks invoke the feeling of the game. Like, I can picture certain scenes that play the songs, but then also all the battle music is so like evocative of the themes of the games, which is like, it's a little reachy. Some people might not hear it the way I do, but like the meshing of instruments and then like the electronic music and the way it like goes together. Every song is kind of overcoming itself. It's about like rising up, like they all crescendo in a cool way, especially the final battle song where the fucking main theme starts playing once you get to the final wave of the final battle. That shit is so hype. Is it better than VLR 999 and what's the other one we played? Somnium Files? I think that's all the story games I forced Bradley to play.
Man, it's kind of wild because like one thing that like you just cannot argue 13 Sentinels has an edge on is the destruction mode. Like, it gives you something to do. Like, the destruction mode is so much better than the puzzle rooms. Like,
yeah. Easily.
So I guess story-wise for me, it comes down to like, I think thematically 13 Sentinels has, I think just kind of, I don't know. It's really happy and sweet, and it tells a bunch of different stories. 999 and VLR, man, I have some really impactful memories with that because 13 Sentinels has mind-blowing plot twists, but I don't want to tell myself I got numb to plot twists by the end, but it's like, because there's so many plot twists, they all get lost with each other, but I can think to like specific points in the run of both 999 and VLR where it was just like, oh, remember that 120-minute stretch that was back to back to back to back, like the 5 biggest plot twists in a row all topping each other. I'm just like,
I think what this clears VLR. I think VLR is and 999 get a little messy when you get into the details of how the plot works, especially because unfortunately VLR sets up a lot of things that don't get resolved in its sequel.
True.
That's a
13
huge bummer.
Sentinels is a standalone thing, man.
And like, I think they could also make a very cool sequel of this game. For example, if this is happening in different Earths, how does those Earth cultures grow? And what happens if they go into conflict with each other? What happens if they start sending some of their consciousness somehow through space and they show up in your simulation? Furthermore, what happens when the 1.2 million people in every residential district have to come to terms with the fact that they're not real and that these 15 kids are special, actual human people? Will they start worshiping these people? Will they go and revolt because, like, oh, they get to decide how we're gonna, like, go on with our reality because they're the real ones and we're AI? Like, they're gonna fight for their own survival. They could make stories off of this, and they could also flesh out what happens in 2188. They could also never touch this again and leave it its own perfect little thing. I wouldn't want a sequel unless they're like, we really want to keep telling stories here because we're that passionate. Because this game has so much passion in it. I think the Uchikoshi games are more rough around the edges, unfortunately. So they got some stuff. But I'm glad I got Bradley to enjoy multiple story games.
Yeah, dude, some great sci-fi stories. And man, I came up with a good hypothetical question.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good.
Related to 13 Sentinels, if we're ready to sign it out.
We are ready to sign it out.
So imagine Vanillaware, like they tweet on their Twitter, and you tweet on Twitter.
You do
and
do
then
that.
It's like, we're excited to announce a brand new 13 Sentinels universe project coming in the next 2 years. And then in like late 2023, they're like, keep an eye out at the Game Awards this year. And then there's a trailer and it says Vanillaware and a 2 pops up on screen. But instead of 13 Sentinels 2, it says second 13 Sentinels game. And then they announce it's a mobile game and it's called 13 Sentinels Cafe, and it's on one of the planets that was colonized.
Yo!
And that version of Iori has a little bakery.
Yo!
And humanity made little chibi robot versions of the Daimos, and you have to make enough cookies to feed all the Daimos coming to your cafe.
Where's the hypothetical in this?
The hypothetical is if they announced that at the Game Awards of 2023, what would your honest reaction be? Would you be a little bit salty but still get it? Would you just be mad? Would you just be hyped?
I'd prefer 13 Sentinels Fighters or Muso.
I was thinking of Fighter too, dude.
Speaking of,
they're also well characterized. Like, you could have different movesets.
You could absolutely, yeah.
I would be like, I would be very confused. I would be like, oh, okay. I still have 13 Sentinels though, so that's all good for me.
Yeah.
I prefer the game where the gacha characters are just different universe versions of like Ogata without pompadour, Tomi Kisaragi hair long,
Hijiyama inside the Okino girl outfit.
Hijiyama wearing the Yakisoba Pond mascot outfit. Like,
Oh my god!
that I'm more down for because fuck it. And also I want super rare BJ. We'll just leave that statement as is. That's fine. Okay, that's everything. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for talking 13 Sentinels with me. Bradley, this was going to be number 2 in Game of the Year, and you blocked me, and then you played it eventually. I think I was alone. Joe hadn't played it either. That was crazy. What a fight. That was a fight equal to them fighting the Daimos. I fucking got it up there.
You did good.
Like the one.
Pathologic beat it. Come on, Brad. You know better now. Bradley knows better. He off screen he told me he was wrong, and then he was like, you can tell them, but I'm not going to admit it because I'm funny like that. That's what he said. All right, bye.
Bye.